Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer, May 21, 1960 to November 28, 1994, also known as the Milwaukee Cannibal or the Milwaukee Monster, was an American serial killer and sex offender who killed and dismembered 17 males between 1978 and 1991. Many of his later murders involve necrophilia, cannibalism, and the permanent preservation of body parts, typically all or part of the skeleton. Childhood. Jeffrey Dahmer was born May 21, 1960, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the first of two sons to Lionel Herbert Dahmer, a Marquette University chemistry student and later a research chemist, and Joyce Annette Dahmer, a teletype machine instructor. Some sources report Dahmer was deprived of attention as an infant. Other sources, however, suggest that Dahmer was generally doted upon as an infant and toddler by both parents, although his mother was known to be tense, greedy for both attention and pity, and argumentative with her husband and their neighbors. As Dahmer entered first grade, Lionel's studies kept him away from home much of the time. When he was home, his wife, a hypochondriac who suffered from depression, demanded constant attention and spent an increasing amount of time in bed. On one occasion, she attempted suicide using Equinol. Consequently, neither parent devoted much time to their son, who later recollected that, from an early age, he felt unsure of the solidity of the family, recalling extreme tension and numerous arguments between his parents during his early years. Dahmer had been an energetic and happy child but became notably subdued after double hernia surgery shortly before his 4th birthday. At elementary school, Dahmer was regarded as quiet and timid. One teacher recollected she detected early signs of abandonment due to his father's absence and mother's illnesses, the symptoms of which increased when she became pregnant with her second child. In October 1966, the family moved to Doylestown, Ohio. From an early age, Dahmer manifested an interest in dead animals. His fascination with dead animals may have begun when, at the age of 4, he saw his father removing animal bones from beneath the family home. According to Lionel, Dahmer was oddly thrilled by the sound the bones made, and became preoccupied with animal bones, which he initially called his fiddlesticks. He occasionally searched beneath and around the family home for additional bones, and explored the bodies of live animals to discover where their bones were located. In May 1968, the family moved to Bath Township, Summit County, Ohio. This address was their 3rd in 2 years, and the Dahmers' 6th address since marriage. The home stood in 1.5 acres of woodland, with a small hut only a short walk from the house, where Dahmer began collecting large insects and the skeletons of small animals, such as chipmunks and squirrels. Some of these remains were preserved in jars of formaldehyde and stowed within the hut. 2 years later, during a chicken dinner, Dahmer asked Lionel what would happen if the chicken bones were placed in bleach. Lionel, pleased by what he believed to be his son's scientific curiosity, demonstrated how to safely bleach and preserve animal bones. In one instance in 1975, Dahmer decapitated the carcass of a dog before nailing the body to a tree and impaling the skull upon a stick in the woodland behind his house. As a prank, he later invited a friend to view the display, claiming he had discovered the remains by chance. The same year Lionel taught his son how to preserve animal bones, Joyce began increasing her daily consumption of Equinol, laxatives and sleeping pills, further minimizing her tangible contact with her husband and children. Adolescence and high school. From his freshman year at Revere High School, Dahmer was seen as an outcast. By age 14, he had begun drinking beer and hard alcohol in the daylight hours, frequently concealing his liquor inside the jacket he wore to school. Dahmer mentioned to one classmate who inquired why he was drinking scotch in a morning history class that the alcohol he consumed was my medicine. When he reached puberty, Dahmer discovered he was gay. He did not tell his parents. In his early teens, he had a brief relationship with another teenage boy, although they never had intercourse. By Dahmer's admission, he began fantasizing about dominating and controlling a completely submissive male partner in his early to mid-teens, and his masturbatory fantasies gradually evolved to his focusing on chests and torsos. When he was about 16, Dahmer conceived a fantasy of rendering unconscious a particular male jogger he found attractive, and then making sexual use of his body. On one occasion, Dahmer concealed himself in bushes with a baseball bat to lie in wait for this man. However, the jogger did not pass by on that particular day. Murder of Stephen Hicks. Dahmer committed his first murder in 1978, 3 weeks after his graduation. On June 18, Dahmer picked up a hitchhiker named Stephen Mark Hicks, who was almost 19. Dahmer lured Hicks to his house on the pretext of drinking. After several hours of talking, drinking and listening to music, Hicks wanted to leave. And I didn't want him to leave. Dahmer bludgeoned Hicks with a 10-pound, 4.5 kilograms, dumbbell. He later stated he struck Hicks twice from behind with the dumbbell as Hicks sat upon a chair. When Hicks fell unconscious, Dahmer strangled him to death with the bar of the dumbbell, then stripped the clothes from Hicks' body before exploring his chest with his hands, then masturbating as he stood above the corpse. Hours later, Dahmer dragged the body to the basement. The following day, Dahmer dissected Hicks' body in his basement. He later buried the remains in a shallow grave in his backyard. Several weeks later, he unearthed the remains and pared the flesh from the bones. College and Army service. 6 weeks after the murder of Hicks, Dahmer's father and his fiancée returned to his home, where they discovered Dahmer living alone. That August, Dahmer enrolled at Ohio State University, OSU, hoping to major in business. On one occasion, Lionel paid a surprise visit to his son, only to find his room strewn with empty liquor bottles. Despite his father having paid in advance for the second term, Dahmer dropped out of OSU after just 3 months. In January 1979, on his father's urging, Dahmer enlisted in the United States Army. He underwent basic training at Fort McClellan in Anniston, Alabama, before training as a medical specialist at Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, Texas. He was occasionally reprimanded for intoxication while stationed at Fort Sam Houston. Owing to Dahmer's alcohol abuse, his performance deteriorated and, in March 1981, he was deemed unsuitable for military service and was later discharged from the Army, returned to Ohio and relocation to West Allis, Wisconsin. After his return to Ohio, Dahmer initially lived with his father and stepmother and insisted on being delegated numerous chores to occupy his time while he looked for work. He continued to drink heavily, and 2 weeks after his return, was arrested for drunk and disorderly conduct. In December 1981, he and Dahmer's stepmother sent him to live with his grandmother in West Allis, Wisconsin. Dahmer's grandmother was the only family member to whom Dahmer displayed any affection. Initially, Dahmer's living arrangements with his grandmother were harmonious. He accompanied her to church, willingly undertook chores, actively sought work and abided by most of her house rules. Although he continued to drink and smoke, Dahmer remained unemployed for over 2 years, during which he lived upon whatever money his grandmother gave him. On August 8, 1982, at Wisconsin State Fair Park, he was observed exposing himself on the south side of the Coliseum, in which 25 people were present, including women and children. For this incident, he was convicted and fined $50 plus court costs. By late 1985, Dahmer had begun to regularly frequent the bathhouses, which he later described as being relaxing places, but during his sexual encounters, he became frustrated at his partner's moving during the act. Following his arrest, he stated, "I trained myself to view people as objects of pleasure instead of as people." For this reason, beginning in June 1986, he administered sleeping pills to his partners, giving them liquor laced with sedatives. He then waited for his partner to fall asleep before performing various sexual acts. Shortly after his bathhouse memberships were revoked, Dahmer read a report in a newspaper regarding the upcoming funeral of an 18-year-old male. He conceived the idea of stealing the freshly interred corpse and taking it home. According to Dahmer, he attempted to dig up the coffin from the ground, but found the soil too hard and abandoned the plan. On September 8, 1986, Dahmer was arrested upon a charge of lewd and lascivious behavior for masturbating in the presence of 2 12-year-old boys as he stood close to the Kinnickinnic River. He initially claimed he had merely been urinating, unaware that there were witnesses, but soon admitted the offense. Ambassador Hotel. On November 20, 1987, Dahmer, at the time residing with his grandmother in West Allis, encountered a 25-year-old man from Ontonagon, Michigan, named Stephen Twomey at a bar and persuaded him to return to the Ambassador Hotel in Milwaukee, where Dahmer had rented a room for the evening. According to Dahmer, he had no intention of killing Twomey, but intended to simply drug him and lie beside him as he explored his body. The following morning, Dahmer awoke to find Twomey lying beneath him on the bed, his chest crushed in and black and blue with bruises. Dahmer purchased a large suitcase, in which he transported Twomey's body to his grandmother's residence. For 2 weeks following Twomey's killing, Dahmer retained Twomey's head wrapped in a blanket. Intermediate murders. According to Dahmer, Twomey's murder was a pivotal incident after which he did not try to control his compulsions. He began to actively seek victims, most of whom he encountered in or around gay bars, and would typically lure them to his grandmother's home. He would drug his victim with triazolam or temazepam before or shortly after engaging in sexual activity with them. Once his victim was unconscious, he strangled them to death. 2 months after the Twomey killing, Dahmer encountered a 14-year-old Native American prostitute, James Dockstader. Dahmer lured him to his grandmother's residence with an offer of $50 to pose for nude pictures. They engaged in sexual activity before Dahmer drugged Dockstader and strangled him on the floor of the cellar. He placed all of Dockstader's remains, excluding the skull, in the trash. On March 24, 1988, Dahmer met a 22-year-old bisexual man, Richard Guerrero, outside a gay bar called the Phoenix. Dahmer lured Guerrero to his grandmother's residence, offering him $50 to spend the night with him. He drugged Guerrero with sleeping pills, strangled him with a leather strap, and fellated the corpse. In September 1988, Dahmer's grandmother asked him to move out, largely because of his drinking, his habit of bringing young men to her house late at night, and the foul smells emanating from the basement and the garage. Dahmer found a one-bedroom apartment at 808 North 24th Street and moved into his new residence on September 25th. 2 days later, he was arrested for drugging and sexually fondling a 13-year-old boy whom he had lured to his home on the pretext of posing nude for photographs. 2 months after his conviction and 2 months prior to his sentencing, Dahmer murdered his 5th victim, a 24-year-old mixed-race aspiring model, Anthony Sears, whom he met at a gay bar on March 25, 1989. According to Dahmer, on this particular occasion he was not looking to commit a crime. However, shortly before closing time that evening, Sears just started talking to me. Dahmer lured Sears to his grandmother's home, where the pair engaged in oral sex before Dahmer drugged and strangled Sears. According to Dahmer, he found Sears exceptionally attractive, and Sears was the first victim from whom he permanently retained any body parts. He preserved Sears' head and genitalia in acetone and stored them in a wooden box, which he later placed in his work locker. On May 23, 1989, Dahmer was sentenced to 5 years probation and 1 year in the House of Correction, with work release permitted so he could keep his job. 1990 murders. On May 14, 1990, Dahmer moved out of his grandmother's house and into 924 North 25th Street, apartment 213, taking Sears' mummified head and genitals with him. Within 1 week of his moving to this address, Dahmer killed his 6th victim, Raymond Smith. Inside the apartment, he gave Smith a drink laced with 7 sleeping pills, then manually strangled him. The following day, Dahmer purchased a Polaroid camera, with which he took several pictures of Smith's body in suggestive positions before dismembering him in the bathroom. In June 1990, Dahmer lured a 27-year-old acquaintance, Edward Smith, to his apartment, where he drugged and strangled him. Dahmer later informed police he had felt rotten about Smith's murder, as he had been unable to retain any parts of his body. Less than 3 months after the murder of Edward Smith, Dahmer encountered a 22-year-old Chicago native named Ernest Miller outside a bookstore on the corner of North 27th Street. When Dahmer attempted to perform oral sex upon Miller, he was informed, "That'll cost you extra," whereupon Dahmer gave Miller a drink laced with 2 sleeping pills. On this occasion, Dahmer had only 2 sleeping pills to give his victim. Therefore, he killed Miller by slashing his carotid artery with the same knife he used to dissect his victims' bodies. Dahmer wrapped Miller's heart, liver, biceps, and portions of flesh from the legs in plastic bags and placed them in the freezer for later consumption. 3 weeks after the murder of Miller, on September 24th, Dahmer encountered a 22-year-old father of 2 named David Thomas at the Grand Avenue Mall. In his statement to police after his arrest, Dahmer said that, after giving Thomas a drink laden with sedatives, he did not feel attracted to him, but was afraid to allow him to awaken, fearing that he would be angry over having been drugged. Therefore, he strangled him and dismembered the body, intentionally retaining no body parts whatsoever. He photographed the dismemberment process and retained these photographs, which later aided in Thomas's identification. Following the murder of Thomas, Dahmer did not kill anyone for almost 5 months, although on a minimum of 5 occasions between October 1990 and February 1991, he unsuccessfully attempted to lure men to his apartment. 1991 murders. In February 1991, Dahmer observed a 17-year-old named Curtis Strader standing at a bus stop near Marquette University. Dahmer drugged Strader, cuffed his hands behind his back, then strangled him to death with a leather strap. Less than 2 months later, on April 7th, Dahmer encountered a 19-year-old named Errol Lindsay walking to get a key cut. Dahmer lured Lindsay to his apartment where he drugged him, then drilled a hole in his skull through which he injected hydrochloric acid with a baster. According to Dahmer, Lindsay awoke after this experiment, which Dahmer had conceived in the hope of inducing a permanent, unresistant, submissive state, saying, "I have a headache. What time is it?" In response to this, Dahmer again drugged Lindsay, then strangled him. On May 24, 1991, Dahmer encountered 31-year-old aspiring model Tony Hughes at a nightclub. He was lured to Dahmer's apartment with an offer of money to pose for photographs. Hughes was drugged into unconsciousness before Dahmer injected hydrochloric acid into his skull in an effort to disable his will and render him submissive, although on this occasion, the drilling and injection proved fatal. On the afternoon of May 26, 1991, Dahmer encountered a 14-year-old Lao teenager, Connor Synthesumphone, on Wisconsin Avenue. Unknown to Dahmer, Synthesumphone was the younger brother of the boy he had molested in 1988. Dahmer offered Synthesumphone money to accompany him to his apartment to pose for Polaroid pictures. According to Dahmer, Synthesumphone was initially reluctant to the proposal, before changing his mind and accompanying him to his apartment, where he posed for 2 pictures in his underwear before Dahmer drugged him into unconsciousness and performed oral sex on him. Before Synthesumphone fell unconscious, Dahmer led the boy into his bedroom, where the body of Tony Hughes, whom Dahmer had killed 3 days earlier, lay naked on the floor. According to Dahmer, he believed that Synthesumphone saw this body yet did not react to seeing the bloated corpse, likely because of the effects of the sleeping pills he had ingested. On this occasion, Dahmer drilled a single narrow hole into the crown of Synthesumphon's skull, through which he injected hydrochloric acid into the frontal lobe. Dahmer then drank several beers while lying alongside Synthesumphone before briefly falling asleep, then leaving his apartment to drink at a bar and purchase more alcohol. In the early morning hours of May 27th, Dahmer returned toward his apartment to discover Synthesumphone sitting naked on the corner of 25th and State, talking in Lao, with 3 distressed young women standing near him. Dahmer approached the women and told them that Synthesumphone, whom he referred to by the alias John Mung, was his friend, and attempted to lead him to his apartment by the arm. The 3 women dissuaded Dahmer, explaining they had phoned 911. When police arrived, Dahmer persuaded them he and Synthesumphone were lovers and that Synthesumphone was simply intoxicated. When police left Synthesumphone with Dahmer in his apartment, Dahmer again injected hydrochloric acid into Synthesumphon's brain, and this proved fatal. Arrest. On July 22, 1991, Dahmer approached 3 men with an offer of $100 to accompany him to his apartment to pose for nude photographs, drink beer, and simply keep him company. One of the trio, 32-year-old Tracy Edwards, agreed to accompany him to his apartment. Upon entering Dahmer's apartment, Edwards noted a foul odor and several boxes of hydrochloric acid on the floor, which Dahmer claimed to use for cleaning bricks. After some minor conversation, Edwards responded to Dahmer's request to turn his head and view his tropical fish, whereupon Dahmer placed a handcuff upon his wrist. When Edwards asked, "What's happening?" Dahmer unsuccessfully attempted to cuff his wrists together, then told Edwards to accompany him to the bedroom to pose for nude pictures. In continuous attempts to prevent Dahmer from attacking him, Edwards repeated that he was Dahmer's friend and that he was not going to run away. Edwards had decided he was going to either jump from a window or run through the unlocked front door upon the next available opportunity. When Edwards next stated he needed to use the bathroom, he asked if they could sit with a beer in the living room, where there was air conditioning. Dahmer consented, and the pair walked to the living room when Edwards exited the bathroom. Inside the living room, Edwards waited until he observed Dahmer have a momentary lapse of concentration before requesting to use the bathroom again. When Edwards rose from the couch, he noted Dahmer was not holding the handcuffs, whereupon Edwards punched him in the face, knocking Dahmer off balance, and ran out the front door. At 11:30 p.m. on July 22nd, Edwards flagged down 2 Milwaukee police officers, Robert Roth and Rolf Mueller, at the corner of North 25th Street. The officers noted Edwards had a handcuff attached to his wrist, whereupon he explained to the officers that a freak had placed the handcuffs upon him and asked if the police could remove them. When the officer's handcuff keys failed to fit the brand of handcuffs, Edwards agreed to accompany the officers to the apartment where, Edwards stated, he had spent the previous 5 hours before escaping. When the officers and Edwards arrived at apartment 213, Dahmer invited the trio inside and acknowledged he had placed the handcuffs upon Edwards, although he offered no explanation as to why he had done so. At this point, Edwards divulged to the officers that Dahmer had also brandished a large knife upon him and that this had happened in the bedroom. Dahmer made no comment to this revelation, indicating to one of the officers, Mueller, that the key to the handcuffs was in his bedside dresser. In the bedroom, Mueller noted there was a large knife beneath the bed. He saw an open drawer which, upon closer inspection, contained scores of Polaroid pictures, many of which were of human bodies in various stages of dismemberment. Mueller walked into the living room to show them to his partner, uttering the words, "These are for real." When Dahmer saw that Mueller was holding several of his Polaroids, he fought with the officers in an effort to resist arrest. The officers quickly overpowered him, cuffed his hands behind his back, and called a second squad car for backup. At this point, Mueller opened the refrigerator to reveal the freshly severed head of a black male on the bottom shelf. A more detailed search of the apartment, conducted by the Milwaukee Police's Criminal Investigation Bureau, revealed a total of 4 severed heads in Dahmer's kitchen. A total of 7 skulls, some painted, some bleached, were found in Dahmer's bedroom and inside a closet. Investigators discovered collected blood drippings upon a tray at the bottom of Dahmer's refrigerator, plus 2 human hearts and a portion of arm muscle, each wrapped inside plastic bags upon the shelves. Elsewhere in apartment 213, investigators discovered 2 entire skeletons, a pair of severed hands, 2 severed and preserved penises, a mummified scalp and, in the 57-gallon drum, 3 further dismembered torsos dissolving in the acid solution. In reference to the recovery of body parts and artifacts at 924 North 25th Street, the chief medical examiner later stated, "It was more like dismantling someone's museum than an actual crime scene." Conviction. Dahmer was then sentenced to life imprisonment plus 10 years upon the first 2 counts. The remaining 13 counts carried a mandatory sentence of life imprisonment plus 70 years.